Sarah munched. It was the first Tuesday of the month, and she was seated with Larry, the John Deere guy, at a restaurant patio where she was looking forward to meeting his agent. Maybe she wasn't making much headway as an actress. Maybe her first film set experience had imploded. Maybe she wasn't a hot babe, but her new friend Larry, who made a good living as a model for John Deere ads despite not having model looks, had given her hope that her way in might be through a similar path. The idea that she could possibly be a model without looking like a model really intrigued her. Bald, overweight Larry did it, so why not she? Hi, I'm Neil A. Yeager, and today I'm reading from my novel, Non-Hollywood. If I could, I'd like to take just a moment to talk about a book that I talked about in a past video. People have asked me about it. It's The 33rd Year, and it's the favorite of the books that I've written. It's very different from Non-Hollywood, both thematically and stylistically. It's about a man who is trying to find some meaning in this crazy modern world of ours. And he finds out just how difficult it is to even try. Needless to say, he goes through a lot. He goes to some extremes to find some sort of meaning. Now, if that sounds at all interesting to you, I would love it if you would check it out. It's at Amazon and everywhere else, and you can check this video's description file for more info. Anyway, back to Non-Hollywood. This is chapter 43, Call My Agent. She is always late, Larry said of his agent, who was supposed to be joining them for lunch. In all the years we've been doing this, I don't think she's ever been on time once. So I never feel guilty about getting started before she's here. Good, said Sarah, because I hate feeling guilty. And I like to eat, said Larry. Sarah looked out at the scenery. They were on the patio of a place on Sunset Boulevard. The setup was that the patio was on the back side of the building rather than the Sunset Boulevard side, which gave it a nice elevated view of parts of West Hollywood and Beverly Hills. Nice view, said Sarah. Yeah, I figure if you're doing something as stereotypically Hollywood as meeting your agent for lunch, then you should do it in a stereotypically Hollywood spot. People have been meeting their agents here since God knows how long. Larry looked out over the view and sighed contentedly. Yeah, this is a great spot. Have you ever seen those photos of old Hollywood? Have I seen them? Sure. I love those old photos, Larry said. I've got several books worth of them. You just get a certain feeling from them, you know? The swank places, people all dressed to the nines. It's that whole glamour thing. It just doesn't exist anymore. People have been having lunch on this patio since the heydays of Hollywood. But do you think Cary Grant ever came here dressed like I am? Sarah glanced down at Larry's outfit. Conservative casual, by no means grungy looking, but still, she knew what he meant. A far cry from glamorous. She said, didn't Joan Crawford have some quote about never leaving the house not looking like Joan Crawford? Yeah, something like that, he said. And there's just no such thing as glamour anymore. These days, our rich and famous tend to dress pretty much like everybody else. Only difference is that their designer t-shirt costs $300 more than the t-shirt in my drawer. A female voice said, "Oh, surely you don't own any t-shirts, Lawrence." Sarah looked up to see a woman walking toward their table. And as Sarah watched the woman, she had to smile. Because here, Sarah was looking at something that you don't usually see in Hollywood folk. Sarah was looking at a real woman. A woman who appeared to be in her late 50s and who actually looked it. No obvious enhancements. The woman could have been Sarah's Aunt Rita who lived in Minneapolis. Larry said, "Of course I have t-shirts. I get a couple of free ones every time you book me to do a photo shoot as a carpenter. Beth, this is Sarah. Sarah, Beth. Sarah's a friend of mine from acting class." Beth raised an eyebrow. Ooh, a friend, eh? Oh, don't start that now, said Larry. Why not? Asked Beth. Sounds horribly interesting. It should give me conversation fodder for weeks. And not just with you. I'll be blabbing to all kinds of people about how one of my middle-aged clients hooked up with a girl half his age. We're not hooking up, said Larry. And what do you mean, half his age? Sarah is more than half of my age. Beth looked at Sarah, then turned back to Larry and said, Actually, hon, probably less than half. Ouch! Larry cried. But you're missing the point, dear. Less than half would actually be even better, from a juiciness standpoint anyway. Okay, enough, said Larry. Enough. Now, when you came up, Sarah and I were just talking about glamour and how it's gone from Hollywood. Beth shook her head and said, Oh, Lawrence, you sound like my father. Sarah, I'm a second generation in this business. My father started the agency and I grew up here. Actually, in a house on Larchmont where there now sits a 7-Eleven. Anyway, when I was growing up, my dad was always lamenting that Hollywood style had gone downhill. Not that he had been around at the peak of old Hollywood either. Still, he would complain to me about how these days all the movie stars were just a bunch of hippies and hobos and what have you. Now, of course, we were never in any of that movie star scene anyway. We've always represented models, not actors, and we were never in the fashion side of things. Dad actually used to bill us as an everyman agency, which I changed even before he retired on us. Sarah jumped in. So that's how you came to represent someone like our John Deere guy here. Oh yeah, we've always represented that type. Dad's first real client who made any money for us anyway, was a guy who portrayed a milkman in a whole slew of ads for Hershey's. This big jolly looking guy who incidentally, when he got older, did a lot of ads as Santa Claus. Dad used to have those Hershey ads plastered all over every wall of his office. For years he kept those things up. Even when we had plenty of other clients getting good work, if you walked into Dad's office, there were 15 versions of that milkman staring you in the face. Larry said, Hey, now there's something I've never portrayed. You got to get me a job as a milkman. Sweetie, milkmen were long gone even when you and I were kids. I think that the likelihood of finding an ad campaign with one is pretty darn slim. And speaking of slim, it looks like you're losing a little weight on me there, Lawrence. How the hell am I supposed to sell you if you start looking like Brad Pitt? Hey, that's your problem, not mine. Sarah asked, What, so fatter is better? Oh, no, said Beth. Actual fat guys are a hard sell. But someone like our Lawrence here, who has just a few extra pounds on him, well, that makes him look more real. And real is the business that I'm in. I don't deal with the brooding anorexic crowd who are photographed half naked even when they're selling clothes. Nope, I deal in the real deal, like this man right here. And she clapped Larry on the back. Gosh, said Larry, thanks, but you do realize that I'd give pretty much anything to be one of those brooding anorexics, even for one day? Which, said Beth, is about how long their careers last. A day. 'Cause pretty doesn't last. You, on the other hand, my friend, can look forward to as long a career as you want. And considering that when you make money, I make money, I hope that you want your career to last a good long time. I've got bills, mortgages, car payments, that young stud I keep in an apartment in Venice Beach. It all adds up. So I need you lot to keep bringing in the cash. Which, by the way, I do appreciate immensely. Pleasure's all mine, said Larry. Just keep that whole real thing you've got going, and we all make money, Beth said as the waiter approached. She ordered something that seemed to require 50 different sets of instructions. When the waiter had gone, Larry suggested that maybe Beth should just go back into the kitchen and make it herself and save some time. Beth replied, Hey, if our waiter's back there, then yes, definitely. I'd cook for hours if I could slide that shirt up and have a look at those abs. Mm-mm. Sarah laughed aloud. She had pretty much decided by this time that she liked Beth. She appreciated the straightforwardness without meanness. She felt that the world could use more of that. She also felt that here, finally, was a ray of light. Here was someone with a way for Sarah to make her way into the business. It was exactly what Sarah needed, and she was now getting hopeful. She fixed Larry with a look which seemed to suggest that she was ready and that he should get on with it. Larry turned to Beth and said, "The reason that I asked Sarah to come along is that I wanted your opinion on her chances of doing what I do." "Oh," said Beth. "Now, Lawrence, that's a first. For you, anyway. Not that I've never heard that sort of thing before, but in all the years that I've known you, I've never known you to do that one." She turned to Sarah. "He must really like you. And though he doesn't have tantalizing abdominal muscles, his butt's actually not bad." "Oh, stop that," Larry said. "You're horrible. No, seriously, what do you think? About your abdominals or about your ass? About Sarah's chance at doing our kind of modeling?" Beth looked away from Larry and toward the waiter at the other side of the room. She said, "Oh, there are those abs again. Yummy." "Beth!" "Right, what do I think?" said Beth, and she turned again toward Sarah. For a few moments, Beth was quiet, seeming to take Sarah in completely, studying her with a professional eye. Sarah felt confident that this intense study would pay off quite well, and she was extremely glad that she had come to this lunch today. Finally, Beth said, "Honestly, and I'm sorry to say this to you, sweetie, but honestly, I think the answer is no. I don't think that I can market you." Well, this was not the response that Sarah had expected. It took her a few moments to take in the words that Beth had spoken. Sarah said, You can't? Am I not real?" "You're not a type, sweetheart. Look at our friend Lawrence here. He's a type. He's an everyman type. You can picture him in all different sorts of blue-collar jobs. Cable guy, yes. Plumber, yes. Small-town dad, yes. Farmer, oh hell yes, definitely, and ring the cash register on that one. He's just got this sort of look to him. But you, and as I say, I'm sorry to say this, but you don't look anything type-wise. If you were 15 years older and 15 pounds heavier, you might look like a mom, or a postal worker, or a grocery store manager. But right now, you're just not a type. And types are what we make our living off of." Sarah stammered, But he and I mean, we're the same. We're the people who aren't the beautiful people." Beth replied, "But he's a type, and you're not. My business is built on types, nothing else. Not what kind of personality you have, or what your education is, or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. I like Lawrence. We've grown to be friends, and I like having lunch with him each month, and even if he decided to quit the business, I'd probably still want to keep getting together for lunch. Of course, I would probably try to bully him back into the business each time, but the point is that liking him has nothing to do with why I represent him. I represent him because I can sell him. I can sell the hell out of him. As far as the business is concerned, he's a product. Okay? A product whose picture, when placed in an ad for, say, power tools, makes you want to go out and buy power tools. Does that make sense?" Sarah replied weakly, "Well, yeah, I guess so. It's kind of hard to take, but yeah, I can see what you're saying, but is there anything I could do to become a type?" Beth replied, "Well, like I said, when you're older, you might try this again. Other than that, the only thing I could think of would be surgery. But honestly, who would get surgery to look ordinary? I can't imagine someone going into a surgeon and asking to look like our friend Lawrence here, no matter how good his career is because of it. Now, if you're going the surgery route, then hell, go for all the fakeness you can get. Come out of it looking like a porn star. Larry jumped in. Beth, you don't believe that. Beth smiled and said, no, you're right, I actually don't. I think that 9 times out of 10, people come out of surgery looking worse rather than better. It's so easy to tell when it's fake. I have friends whose faces are so tight they can't make normal expressions, and their lips are so insanely puffy that you can't understand a word they say. You just hear this kind of mumbling like, but their skin is so tight you could bounce a quarter off their cheeks. Not to mention, one friend of mine who, when you hug her, you feel like you're being impaled by 2 concrete footballs. No thanks. Not for me. But then again, I'm not trying to make that kind of living. And she smiled at Sarah. Sarah did her best to put her hurt feelings aside and smile back. Now, said Beth, let's forget this business talk and just go with my lunch with a friend who has brought along a friend of his who seems like a really nice person. Must be for Lawrence to bring her. We'll have a nice lunch. I'll mentally undress Mr. Waiter, and we'll all get to know Sarah better. So, Sarah, tell me about yourself. Sarah resigned, cleared her throat, and began, well, I'm a waitress.